Hey everyone, and welcome to our deep dive today.
It's great to be here.
We're going to be looking at, compulsive behaviors,
Oh, yeah.
and how we kind of struggle with those in the modern world.
Mm-hmm.
We've got some excerpts from Dopamine Nation, this great book, and,
Oh, yeah.
some other research articles and things.
Cool.
And it's really about kind of figuring out how to find balance in a world that's just like,
Right.
practically overflowing with stuff that's tempting us all the time.
It's really a topic that resonates, I think, especially now.
Yeah.
It's kind of remarkable how our brains, which were wired for a very different world,
Right.
are now having to interact with the one that we've kind of created for ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that really just struck me,
Mm-hmm.
from the very beginning of looking at this material
Yeah.
was this idea that our brains process pleasure and pain in the same place.
Oh, wow.
So like they're two sides of the same coin,
Yeah.
How does that even work?
Well, it's fascinating, isn't it? So the brain is constantly seeking equilibrium
Right.
between these two forces.
Okay.
So think of it as a balance scale.
Okay.
When the pleasure side tips down, we experience that rush of reward.
Right.
But when the pain side dips, it manifests as craving,
Oh,
a sense of wanting or even longing.
yeah.
And it's why that second piece of chocolate can be so alluring.
Oh, totally.
Or why we get that almost ache when we finish a really good book.
Yeah.
It's that balance in action.
So if this pleasure-pain balance is like so fundamental to how our brains are wired,
Right.
why are so many of
Yeah.
why does it seem like we're struggling to stay balanced?
Well, you're right. Our modern world kind of throws a wrench in the works, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, we are just surrounded by an abundance of things that trigger these dopamine rushes.
Right.
You think about highly processed foods, addictive apps, just endless entertainment options. It's everywhere.
It's everywhere. Yeah.
And, this constant bombardment can make it incredibly difficult for our brains to find that natural equilibrium,
Yeah.
that it's sort of designed to seek.
It's interesting you mentioned that historical context too,
Yeah.
because the book was talking about how for a long time doctors believed that a certain amount of pain was actually healthy.
Oh, interesting.
And now it's like we're obsessed with eliminating any kind of pain or discomfort.
Right.
And that might actually be part of the problem.
Yeah, that's a really insightful observation.
Yeah.
It's almost as if we've swung too far in the other direction by trying to avoid all discomfort.
Right.
We might inadvertently be making ourselves more susceptible to these kind of, compulsive behaviors.
Yeah. And the book has all these crazy examples,
Oh,
about how addictive substances have kind of evolved, like cigarettes.
yeah.
It's amazing to think that we went from hand-rolled cigarettes to machines that are churning out like 20,000 a minute.
Wow.
Talk about a dopamine delivery system.
It's incredible. And, that increase in production
Yeah.
goes hand in hand with an increase in potency, too.
Oh, for sure.
One of the things the book highlights is the accessibility and variety of opioids now.
It's scary.
Oh, it's alarming, even in forms like lollipops, which makes them even more appealing and even harder to resist.
Right. Right.
So we're really dealing with a different landscape.
And it's not just about drugs either, right?
Yeah.
The author talks about her own struggle with romance novel addiction,
Oh, wow.
fueled by the instant gratification of ebooks.
Right.
And it's a great example of how technology just amplifies these addictive tendencies.
Absolutely. I mean, the ease and immediacy with which we can access information and entertainment and social connection these days,
Right.
it's unprecedented. We're constantly bombarded with these quick hits of dopamine.
That's true.
And it's rewiring our brains in ways that we're only beginning to understand.
So what can we do about it?
Yeah.
I mean, if we're essentially living in this dopamine buffet, how do we regain some control?
Yeah.
How do we find that balance?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think the book suggests that we can learn a lot from people who are in addiction recovery.
Okay.
They've developed some really powerful strategies for navigating a world that's full of temptation.
Right.
And one of the most intriguing concepts is dopamine fasting.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah,
That sounds intense.
it does.
Is it really about abstaining from all pleasure?
Not exactly. It's
Right.
more about taking a strategic break
Okay.
from specific rewarding activities.
Got it.
Kind of reset your brain's reward system.
Okay.
It's like giving your dopamine receptors a chance to recalibrate.
Right.
And, the book lays out a helpful acronym to guide the process.
Okay, so break it down for us.
Okay, so it's dopamine.
Dopamine. Okay.
Dopamine.
What does each letter stand for?
So it stands for delay objectives, problems, abstain, mindfulness, insight, and next steps.
Wow, that's a lot.
It is, but it's all about making a conscious choice to pause
Okay.
before indulging in something that typically triggers a dopamine rush.
So you're really thinking about
You're
it.
thinking about it, you're considering your objectives, why
Right.
am I seeking this reward?
Yeah.
And then you acknowledge any potential negative consequences.
Yeah.
And then you intentionally abstain from that reward
Got it.
for a set period of time.
Okay, and this is where it gets interesting.
Right.
How does mindfulness fit into all of this?
Well, mindfulness is key because it's about paying attention to your cravings,
Okay.
noticing how they feel in your body,
Hmm.
observing how they change over time.
Got it.
And, through this process, you gain insight into your own patterns and motivations.
Okay.
And then finally, you think about the next steps. How will you approach this reward in the future?
I see.
So it's a whole process.
The book has some pretty compelling stories about how this actually works.
Oh, yeah.
In real life, too, right?
Yeah.
Like Delilah's experience with dopamine fasting from cannabis.
Delilah's story really illustrates this concept beautifully.
Yeah.
She realized how cannabis use had crept into every corner of her life.
Wow.
And through dopamine fasting, she began to see the benefits of moderation.
Yeah.
It wasn't about giving up cannabis entirely, but rather about making more conscious choices
Right.
about her consumption.
So dopamine fasting is one tool we can borrow from people in recovery.
Yeah.
What else can we learn from folks who have successfully navigated addiction?
Another powerful technique is self-binding.
Oh, yeah.
Essentially creating barriers between yourself and those tempting rewards.
Okay.
And these barriers can be as simple as choosing not to keep unhealthy snacks in your home,
Right.
or as complex as, some of the things that Jacob had to do. He had to implement some really strict measures to distance himself from triggers that fueled his compulsive behaviors.
Wow.
But the results were remarkable. He was able to regain control, break free from the grip of his obsession, and ultimately rebuild his relationship with his wife.
That's powerful.
It is.
It's amazing how powerful those self-imposed limitations can be.
It really is.
Kind of makes me think about honesty,
Yeah.
both with ourselves and with other people.
Mm-hmm.
The book talks about radical honesty as this key ingredient in restoring balance.
Yeah.
What's the connection there?
Well, honesty plays a crucial role because it fosters a deeper level of self-awareness and accountability.
Okay.
It can be uncomfortable,
Oh, yeah.
but it also creates an opportunity for genuine connection and support.
Right.
And, when we're talking about addiction and compulsive behaviors, those things are essential.
The story of Drake, who chose to plead guilty to his DUI, even against his lawyer's advice,
Oh, wow.
really stuck with me.
Yeah.
His honesty led to some unexpected positive consequences
That's great.
and like a profound shift in his perspective.
It's amazing how that works sometimes.
And then there's Todd,
Yeah.
whose commitment to honesty through step 10 of Alcoholics Anonymous
Right.
totally transformed his relationships for the better.
It's amazing, isn't it, how powerful that is?
Yeah, it really is.
These stories really showcase the transformative power of honesty,
Mm-hmm.
aligning our actions with our values, even when it's challenging.
Right.
Can lead to profound personal growth and deeper, more authentic connections with others.
So it seems like there's a theme kind of emerging here.
What's that?
It's not about eliminating all pleasure
Right.
or seeking constant comfort.
Yeah,
It's about finding some kind of sustainable balance
exactly.
between those two poles.
Precisely. And sometimes counterintuitively, that means embracing a certain degree of discomfort.
Yeah, discomfort.
Discomfort, yeah.
So it's interesting, right, how much our assumptions about pleasure and pain
Mm-hmm.
really play into this whole conversation.
Yeah.
We've been so conditioned to think
Right.
that a good life
Yeah.
equals a comfortable life.
Right.
But what if that's actually backfiring?
Okay. That's a key insight
Yeah.
from all this research.
Yeah.
It turns out that intentionally, engaging with discomfort
Okay.
can actually be incredibly beneficial.
What?
There's a growing body of research
All right.
around this concept called hormesis.
Hormesis.
Hormesis,
Okay.
which basically suggests that exposing ourselves
What's
to
here?
controlled amounts of stress
Okay.
can actually lead to these remarkable adaptations,
Wow.
enhance our resilience, and even longevity.
So wait, are you saying that seeking out discomfort,
Mm-hmm.
even pain can be a good thing?
Sometimes.
That seems so counterintuitive.
I know, right?
Yeah.
But think about it.
Okay.
We already kind of intuitively understand this in certain contexts,
Like what?
like the runner's high.
Oh, yeah.
The initial exertion is definitely a form of physical stress,
Right.
but it leads to that surge of endorphins,
Yeah.
and you get that feeling of euphoria,
That's true.
right? Or how about the thrill of watching a scary movie? You're willingly subjecting yourself to that adrenaline rush because it creates a sense of excitement and even pleasure.
Yeah, those are good examples.
Those are examples of hormesis in action.
Okay.
It's like your body's natural response to stress, releasing those feel-good chemicals like dopamine and norepinephrine to help you adapt and overcome that challenge.
So the book talks about Michael,
Yeah.
who shifted from a cocaine addiction to ice baths
Wow.
to find balance.
That's pretty intense.
That's a pretty extreme example.
It is.
Right.
But Michael's story really highlights the potential of hormesis to reset that pleasure-pain balance. He found that by intentionally exposing himself to the discomfort of cold water immersion, he could trigger that same rush of dopamine and norepinephrine that he previously sought through cocaine.
It's like hacking your brain's reward system, but in a healthy way.
Exactly.
But what does the science actually say about this? Yeah. Are there any studies that actually back up these anecdotal experiences?
Absolutely.
Okay.
There's a wealth of research supporting the benefits of hormesis.
Okay.
For example, studies have shown that cold water immersion can increase dopamine and norepinephrine levels.
Interesting.
Leading to that mood boost and increased alertness that we were just talking about.
So taking cold showers is basically like giving yourself a natural dopamine hit.
Yeah.
Minus the negative consequences.
Pretty much.
That's pretty cool.
And the benefits go beyond just a mood boost.
Okay.
There's evidence suggesting that these types of stressors can actually promote neurogenesis.
Neurogenesis, growth of new brain cells.
Wow. So we're not just talking about like temporary changes.
No.
We're talking about actually altering the physical structure of our brain.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
It is incredible. And it's not just cold exposure.
Oh, okay.
There's also intermittent fasting, calorie restriction.
Wow.
Even exposure to certain types of radiation. Really?
All of these have been shown to have hormetic effects.
Interesting.
Boosting resilience and even promoting longevity.
So it sounds like a bit of a balancing act.
It is.
You know, how do we know how much stress is enough to be beneficial?
Right.
But not so much that it becomes harmful.
That's a great question. And like with anything, moderation is key.
Okay.
The idea is not to push yourself to the point of exhaustion or injury, but rather to find that sweet spot where you're challenging yourself just enough to trigger those adaptive responses.
So it's about finding that Goldilocks zone.
Exactly.
Not too much stress, not too little, but just the right amount.
Just
to stimulate growth.
To stimulate growth, yeah.
This whole conversation makes me think about parenting.
Oh, yeah.
You know, are we doing our kids a disservice by trying to shield them from every little discomfort or setback?
Yeah.
The book kind of touches on this idea of overprotected childhoods.
Yeah.
And the potential downsides of that.
It's a really interesting point, you know?
Yeah.
Of course we want to protect our children from harm.
Of course.
But it's also crucial to equip them with the tools they need to navigate the inevitable challenges of life. By allowing them to experience manageable amounts of stress and discomfort, we actually help them develop resilience and coping skills.
It's like that saying, prepare the child for the road, not the road for the child.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's such a good reminder that we can't pave the road for our kids forever.
We can't.
We need to help them build strong foundations so that they can navigate the ups and downs with confidence.
So instead of focusing on eliminating all pain, maybe we should be teaching them how to manage discomfort. How to bounce back from setbacks.
Absolutely.
And how to find strength in adversity.
I love that.
Yeah.
You know, life is full of challenges.
It is.
And the ability to cope with those challenges is what allows us to truly thrive.
So this makes me think about mental toughness, you know, grit, resilience, whatever you want to call it. Is that something we can actually develop through this intentional exposure to discomfort?
The research suggests that yes, absolutely. Just like we can train our muscles to become stronger, we can train our minds to become more resilient.
So it's like building up our mental immune system.
I love that analogy. And the book gives some practical tips for how to do this.
Okay, cool.
It highlights the story of David, who used a graded approach to overcome his social anxiety.
Oh, wow.
You know, he started with small, manageable challenges.
Like what?
Like making brief eye contact or engaging in small talk. And gradually worked his way up to more demanding social situations.
So it's like exposure therapy.
It is.
But for everyday life challenges.
Exactly. And over time, he was able to rewire his brain.
Wow.
And find a level of comfort and confidence that he never thought possible.
These stories are so empowering.
They are.
It's like a reminder that we're not just victims of our brains or our circumstances.
Right.
We have more agency than we realize.
Absolutely.
When it comes to shaping our own well-being.
That's one of the most hopeful messages from Dopamine Nation.
Yeah.
You know, it's not about giving up on pleasure or becoming some kind of ascetic.
Right.
It's about understanding how our brains work.
Right.
And using that knowledge to create a life that's both enjoyable and meaningful.
And it seems like there's a connection here back to honesty.
Yeah.
You know, that we were talking about earlier.
Right.
Is honesty still crucial?
It is.
As we kind of embrace discomfort and build resilience?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Honesty is essential for understanding ourselves, our motivations, and the impact of our choices.
Right.
It's also crucial for building genuine connections with others and creating a sense of belonging, which is so vital for well-being.
That sense of belonging is so important, especially in a world that can often feel so isolating and disconnected.
It's true.
You know, it's like an antidote to the loneliness that can fuel so many compulsive behaviors.
Exactly. The book highlights how radical honesty can foster what's called prosocial shame.
Prosocial shame.
Prosocial shame.
Okay.
Which is a type of accountability that strengthens bonds rather than isolating individuals.
Interesting.
It's about creating communities where we can be vulnerable, support each other, and grow together.
This reminds me of 12-step programs, like Alcoholics Anonymous.
Absolutely.
You know, they've created this whole culture of honesty and accountability and support that helps people overcome addiction and find a sense of belonging.
And it's not just limited to AA.
Right.
You know, any community that encourages open communication and shared vulnerability can create that same sense of belonging and mutual support.
So it's about finding those safe spaces where we can be our true selves.
Exactly.
Imperfections and all, without fear of judgment or rejection.
That's the key.
And that's where radical honesty comes in.
It is.
You know, it's about being willing to share our struggles and our mistakes and our triumphs, knowing that we'll be met with compassion and understanding.
Exactly.
This makes me think about honesty within families, too.
Yeah.
You know, the book talks about how open communication within families can be such a powerful source of resilience and connection. That stolen chocolate story from the author's childhood really illustrates this.
It's a great example. You know, it highlights how those seemingly small moments of honesty can actually shape our family culture. It's about creating an environment where it's safe to be imperfect, to make mistakes and to learn from them. And it's about modeling that behavior for our children, showing them that honesty is about living in alignment with our values.
So instead of striving for this like perfect, pain-free family life, we should be focusing on building the foundation of trust and honesty and resilience.
Precisely because that's what will ultimately equip our families to navigate the inevitable challenges that life throws their way.
This whole conversation is so refreshing.
I agree.
It's like we've been sold this idea that happiness is about avoiding all discomfort. But maybe true fulfillment comes from embracing the full spectrum of human experience.
Absolutely.
The highs and the lows.
Highs and the lows.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more. Dopamine Nation provides a really good roadmap for achieving this. It's about understanding our brains, setting healthy boundaries, seeking out appropriate challenges, and building a life that's rich in meaning and connection.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground, haven't we? In this deep dive. From understanding how our brains work to exploring ways to find balance in a world that's constantly, you know, stimulating our reward systems.
It's really made me rethink what it means to live a good life. You know, are we really aiming for just constant comfort and ease? Or is there something more, you know?
Is there a deeper level of fulfillment that comes from embracing, you know, the full spectrum of human experience?
Absolutely.
I think that's a question so many of us are grappling with. You know, these days.
It's tough.
We're just bombarded with messages that tell us happiness is about, you know.
Just maximize pleasure, minimize pain.
Exactly.
But maybe it's not that simple.
Yeah, maybe it's not.
The book argues that this constant pursuit of easy pleasure might actually be setting us up for disappointment.
Okay.
It keeps us on this hedonic treadmill.
Oh, the hedonic treadmill. I've heard of that.
Always chasing that next dopamine hit.
Right.
But never quite reaching that state of lasting satisfaction.
Right. It's like we're constantly searching
Yeah.
for something outside of ourselves.
Yeah.
To fill a void that can only be filled from within.
Exactly. And one of the keys to finding that inner fulfillment, I think, is through radical honesty.
Okay.
You know, that kind of honesty that allows us to really confront our deepest fears and desires.
We keep coming back to this idea of honesty.
We do.
Why do you think it's so central to this whole conversation?
Well, honesty is the foundation upon which we build trust.
Okay.
Both with ourselves and with others.
Right.
It's about being willing to acknowledge our imperfections.
Right.
Our mistakes.
Our vulnerabilities.
Our vulnerabilities, yeah, exactly.
But isn't there a risk that being too honest can make us feel exposed?
Sure.
Vulnerable.
I mean, vulnerability is often seen as a weakness.
Right.
But I think it's actually a source of strength.
Good.
You know, it's what allows us to connect with others on a deeper level.
Right.
To build authentic relationships.
Yeah,
to create a sense of belonging.
The book shares some really powerful stories.
It does.
About how honesty, even when it's difficult, can lead to those unexpected positive outcomes.
Yeah.
Like Drake's decision to plead guilty to his DUI.
Oh, yeah.
It would have been so much easier to fight the charges.
Way easier.
But his honesty led to a greater sense of integrity.
Right.
And self-awareness.
Exactly. And then there's Todd.
Oh, yeah, Todd.
Whose commitment to honesty through step 10 of AA totally transformed his relationships and his whole outlook on life.
These stories really demonstrate that honesty isn't just about following rules.
It's not.
It's about living in alignment with our values.
Exactly.
Even when it's hard.
Even when it's really hard.
It's about having the courage to be our true selves.
Yeah.
Even when it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, I love that.
And I'm thinking about the author's story, too.
Yeah.
About the stolen chocolate.
Right.
And how that became a teachable moment for her kids.
It's such a good story.
That honesty and forgiveness.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's a beautiful example of how seemingly small moments can have this ripple effect.
Yeah.
You know, shaping the culture of our families.
Absolutely, in our communities. It's about creating a space where it's safe to make mistakes.
Right.
To admit when we're wrong and to learn from our experiences.
So honesty is about more than just telling the truth.
It is.
It's about creating this culture of trust and accountability and support.
Exactly.
And that culture of honesty can extend beyond our families.
Oh, yeah.
Into our wider communities, too.
Absolutely.
You know, whether it's a workplace or a friendship group or a spiritual community.
Right.
Honesty is that glue that binds us together.
I love that.
It's about creating those spaces where we can show up authentically, you know, without pretense or the need to impress, knowing that we'll be accepted for who we are.
And when we feel accepted and supported, we're more likely to take risks.
It's a step outside our comfort zones.
Exactly.
To grow.
To grow, yeah.
It strikes me that this whole conversation has been about challenging our assumptions.
It has.
About pleasure and pain.
Right.
About honesty and vulnerability.
Absolutely.
But what it really means to live a good life.
We've been conditioned to believe that happiness is about avoiding discomfort at all costs.
Right.
But maybe true fulfillment comes from embracing the full spectrum of human experience.
The highs and the lows.
The highs and the lows, the joys and the sorrows.
It's about finding that sweet spot.
It is.
That balance, you know, between seeking pleasure and accepting pain.
Right.
Between pushing ourselves and knowing when to rest. Between striving for growth and being content with where we are.
And it's about recognizing that we're all in this together.
Yeah.
We're all flawed, we all make mistakes, and we all need connection and support.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Dopamine Nation, what's the one thing you hope our listeners will take away?
I hope they'll remember that they have more power than they realize. We're not just at the mercy of our brains or our circumstances.
Right.
We can choose to shape our relationship with pleasure and pain, with honesty and vulnerability.
Yeah.
We can choose to create a life that's both meaningful and fulfilling.
This has been such an insightful conversation.
It has.
Thank you so much for joining us on this journey.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope it's given you some new perspectives. And some tools to navigate the complexities of modern life.
Absolutely.
And to create a life that's truly your own.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here.